Hey, welcome to Ed, a podcast about the teaching life. This is Conversation 87, and I'm your host, Shane Lawrence. Ed is a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network powered by ATV. And this week I am joined by former teacher, now full-time podcaster, Sara Candela. Okay, well, I think we've got all the gremlins exercised out of the system now. So officially, hey, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for asking me.
Yeah. Well, hey, okay. Before we really get rolling, though, I have to ask, how do you say your last name? Because I'm pretty sure I'm going to do it wrong.
It's pronounced Candela.
Candela. Oh, I think I actually got that right. I'll have to go back. I recorded before we started talking, so I will check. But I think I actually got it right for once in my life. Awesome.
The only other way other people ever say it is Candela.
It was a toss-up
in the wrong place.
Yeah. So
either way, it just means light anyway. So.
Is it really that straightforward? Just light?
Yeah, and actually, Candela is actually, I only know this from being a teacher of high school students, is actually a unit of light in physics. So whenever 11th graders would get up to the unit, it's actually literally in their physics textbook was a unit called Candela. They'd come running to my room. We started you in class today.
It's a little unsettling.
Yeah, I'm like, well, the first time I heard that, I was like, what are you talking? I was yelling at them. I'm like, stop making fun of me. And then I realized that they were telling the truth.
Oh, that is, well, it's funny because my last name is Lawrence, and I had a student just stop me in the hallway with it. She's like, I just realized there's an element named after you.
Oh,
there's Laurentium.
Yes.
So she just thought it was the strangest thing. It was like, yeah, well, okay, well, that's the thing.
Yeah, when they make connections between worlds, it's mind-boggling.
Absolutely. Well, it's what we're aiming at, right? I guess so. Even if the connections are sometimes a little bit odd. Anyway, hey, how's your day going?
Pretty good, actually. I'm very aware of my echoing right now, so I'm trying not to focus on that. Like unsettling sitting in a different room, but my day's going pretty good. I started off a little slow, but going to be a busy week. I'm kind of dealing with a lot of different jobs right now, so I'm trying to juggle that, and so yeah. A little bit of a slow start to a Monday, but I know that it's going to pick up in the next couple of days. So I'm just gearing up for that.
You're working multiple jobs these days?
I'm working multiple jobs right now, so I'm not sure. And that's kind of a shift that I'm in the middle of. So I don't know how much you know about my story at all.
I know that you're on Twitter and you're at Sara Candela 9. And I know that you love movies, which is kind of how we connected. So, yeah. And you have a podcast. But other than that, it's a bit of a blank slate. So feel free to fill me in.
So my story is that I am actually not teaching at the moment. I was an English teacher, high school English teacher for 15 years.
Okay.
And pretty much exactly 1 year ago, I left my job mid-year. So it's of my own accord, just of no other crazy reason. Well, there's a crazy reason on my end. At least people tell me that it's crazy at the time, but no other circumstances, and kind of shocked everybody around me, both in and out of the school setting. But it actually all has to do with podcasting. So so if I kind of flash back, I don't know, maybe 2014, 13, 14, 15, my brother and his best friend started a podcast. We were all audio fans. And, as a teacher, I had started to, I was listening to podcasts for a long time, like education based stuff, and had started a little bit dabbling in using them in the classroom. But this was like a long time ago, when most of what me and like people that I knew listened to was NPR based stuff. So we would use a lot of that if we could in the classroom. But my brothers and I were always really into that form of media. So he and his friends started a show, and I was like really interested in the process, and back then, and would help them whenever I could. And I was on an episode or two and helped them put on a live show in New York City. And all of the things that went into producing a small little independent show. And they gained a lot of traction and they only were around for like a year. And then it became so much work because they both had full-time jobs that were in industries that had nothing to do with podcasting.
Yeah.
So they had a show that required a lot of research and they were traveling around and like meeting guests in different various places. And like, so it just became too much of an outside of work burden for something that they weren't making any money for.
Right.
And it was a shame because they were really good at it. And so I connected with that very well. And then I think they ended like sometime mid 2015. And then from that moment on, I never stopped thinking about it. I was like, how could and it became a focus of mine in summers. Like when I was off from school, I became a little obsessed with like, how can I like get into this world and like somehow be a part? Like I had no idea how people did it. Like I really had no connection except for them into that world. And like, how can I like do something that combines education? Because it's so much of podcasting is like education-y to me.
Yeah.
So I was like, and I had a background in speech and communication and, from college and grad school, and speaking in general was always something that interested me. So all of it together just seemed to be something that I just couldn't shake out of my brain. So anytime I had breaks from school, I was always thinking like, how can I make something happen? Is there a way that I can bridge, audio and teaching? Like, what can I do? And then it just left my brain for a while because I really didn't see an answer. And then in 2017, I was having like some life shifts. I was in the middle of a divorce and a whole bunch of other things. And suddenly with that, I was moving around because of the divorce. So like, because of that, my view of what my life and my job could be kind of opened up. It's like weird how that happens. One thing happens and then it kind of like snowballs into, what else can I change? Like you kind of get courage in other areas, I guess.
Yeah.
And I started that school year, fall of 2017. And that was going into my 15th year. And I just kind of like a bunch of things fell into place. I started dating someone who's moving out to California. I started really looking around for like, if I were to move out to California. I was in New York at the time. And I was if I were to move, So I was like, if I were to move, I'm like, what is out there in LA? And so I went back to my brother, and I had still kept in contact with a couple people that he worked with in podcasting when he had his show. And I had stayed in contact with them because I was involved with it a little bit when I helped him. So I contacted them and was like, hey, I might be moving out to LA next year randomly. Like if I find myself in California, is there anyone I could talk to? Or is there a way I can get a part-time job now, like learning something after school? And I did. I wound up, put me in a few different directions, but I wound up finding randomly a group I started searching on Facebook groups. I'm like, how do people learn how to podcast? So I found a Facebook group that was called Podcast Junkies, not knowing that it was a podcast. Actually, the name of a podcast. I thought it was a fan club for podcast fans. And it had something like 6,000 members in it. And I was like, wow, this must be where a lot of people go. And then I just posted in it like, hey, I'm a teacher in New York. I have a lot of experience I was teaching journalism. Like I taught journalism and ran a school newspaper for 12 years. So I knew I had all this background in editorial stuff that also could help me. And so I just put a little thing, almost like put a mini resume on a Facebook group
for a podcast.
Like,
awesome.
I'm like, hey, I don't even know what I would do, but I'll do anything. If you want to teach me a skill, I have all of this teaching experience and working with kids. I'll do anything. Wow. So the guy running the group called me like 10 minutes later, or messaged me on Facebook and said, hey, you just put a message in my Facebook group. He's like, and I later learned that it was the name of his podcast. And so he's like, can you talk in like 10 minutes? And I was like, okay. I'm leaving school right now, but I can call you on my way home. And so we talked while I was driving home from school that day. And 2 days later, he had hired me part-time. He just happened to be the owner of a production company in LA.
Uh-huh.
And so
Wow.
he started training me in all this stuff. And so that was like October of 2017.
Mhm.
And then I started working for him like after school, 10 hours a week. Had no idea what I was doing, was so nervous like all the time. I was like, why are these people trusting me?
Oh, wow.
I'm like, I don't know how to do anything else but teach. That's literally I still feel it's only very recently that I felt like I have any skills outside of being able to be in a room full of teenagers and, make something of the madness. Like that's all I know how to do. I'm like, I'm trained for nothing else. I'm warning you. And no one cared. They just kind of were like, sure, let's see what kind of things you can do. And let's see how we can build on what you already know how to do. And so I wound up, by the time it was like October, November, December, I was working, by the end of December of 2017, I was probably working like 20 hours a week for him after school.
Holy.
And by that time, we had already decided that I was going to move at the end of January. So we waited for midterms for testing week. And I had already told my school mid-December. They were like shocked and everyone's like, what the hell? And I'm like, yeah, I think I'm just going to go. Like I can't wait for the summer. I got to just go now. Or it was a feeling of like, if I wait for the summer, like I'm going to be killing myself working this other job and not being able to put myself into, because I love teaching and I was really good at it. And my students were like horrified. I taught juniors and seniors.
Right.
And so they were like very attached to me and, they were horribly upset that I was leaving mid-year, but the idea was like, I'm not someone who can put half of myself into something. And I think you find that with a lot of teachers. Mm-hmm. You become dedicated to, at least a specific part of what you do every day. I mean, you have to be, I think, to be really effective.
Yeah.
And I was known as that kind of a teacher. So I think that was a little bit more shocking. But people also knew that I had these other things that I wanted to pursue outside of the classroom. So the idea was if I waited till summer to just cut it at the end of the year, I just felt like I wouldn't be able to put that attention into my students and my schoolwork. And I knew the schoolwork load was only going to get worse in the spring because I'd be teaching SAT classes and all that. And I was like, and then I won't be able to learn as much in this other profession, in this other area. Like I just wouldn't be able to divide my time that way. I felt like doing the extra hours for a couple months was already like killing me. So I just decided, I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to try it. And I'm like, this doesn't mean that I have to not teach anymore. It just means that this is the time for me to try this thing. And my goal being that I wanted to be able to somehow bridge the two. Like, can I somehow find a career somewhere or create one that is, pushing into schools and teaching kids how to podcast or teaching or working with high schoolers and middle schoolers on speaking, public speaking and stuff like that. So that was my idea. I'm like, I don't know if this exists, but I'm going to see if I can find a space for it. So I did. I just left. I drove across the country with my 2 dogs in January of last year and wound up in Los Angeles.
Wow.
And then by like February 1st is when I started full-time working for that production company. So I was working full-time for them up until very recently when I started to take on other like little part-time positions and do some work on my own.
Yep.
So now I'm like, so when I say I have multiple jobs right now, it's because now I'm actually producing a couple of podcasts independently as well. Plus working on my own show, so my life is just filled with all of these seemingly random pieces that all kind of go back to one beginning, I guess.
Wow.
So that's my introduction.
Well, thanks for coming on the show. Wow. Well, okay. So we got to dig into this. I mean, I think you're probably like one of only 6 people in history who've actually entered into the podcasting industry getting paid for it. So, like, congratulations on that. That's amazing.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I know. It's really kind of wild, and I had zero experience at all.
Wow. So,
into it,
well, this should be a real encouragement to anyone who's looking at getting into podcasting. It's like, well, what do you need? Nothing.
Nothing.
You don't need anything other than just find the right Facebook post or Facebook group and then just throw your resume out there.
Well, I mean, that's what I tell people now. It's like, I mean, even for a while now, I'm like, I don't even have a resume anymore. I just go online and I just find places, Twitter, anywhere. It's literally, and the podcasting industry in particular is so just like so friendly and people oriented and it's all about connections and relationships, even just casual ones. I mean, everybody is so welcoming and everyone just wants to teach each other and help each other. Yeah. I mean, just me being on this is an indication of that. I mean, we don't know each other and you just asked if we could be on each other's shows. And I'm like, yeah, sure. And that stuff happens every day in this world.
Well, that seems to be fairly characteristic of sort of the creative industries that, everyone's willing to help each other out. I mean, I teach film studies and, it's so easy to get like my grade 9 students, they always have to do like a presentation on some sort of industry role. And I say, and so get me a guest speaker. Like, how do you do that? I'm like, just we have like a local, group. I'm in Edmonton, so not exactly a filmmaking hotbed, but I'm like, just go in there, put in a message, say you're a student, you're looking for guest speakers, and we get guest speakers. Right. And we get, we got a cinematographer who just came off of a Netflix series. We got the go-to animal trainer for all of Canada and even throughout North America, and he came and talked about like zebras and horses and moose and spiders for like an hour and we were just transfixed. So yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's just such a great industry. So anyway, sorry. Oh, warm fuzzies, blah, blah, blah.
Well, no, that actually speaks to my point as well. And it's another reason why, the concept of working on stuff like this with students is so appealing to me too, because I mean, one of my favorite parts of my job forever was the fact that I had the amazing opportunity to teach journalism and work with kids on student publications for so long in a few different schools. Pretty much any school that I moved to, I always wound up weaseling my way into the journalism department.
Weaseling, that's an interesting choice of verbs.
Even if I showed up and there was obviously someone else already doing it, I somehow wound up in it in some fashion.
Just weaseled your way in. Awesome.
Yeah, and one of the last things I was in the middle of doing before I left that January was over the couple months before that, I'd been working with a couple of my journalism students who approached me. And I guess because I was always so open about the stuff that I was into outside of school, and they all knew things that I listened to. And a couple of students from journalism approached me and said they were interested in starting to podcast and wanted to know if they could do it in conjunction with like writing for the newspaper. And I was like, all right, let's figure out how we can do this.
Yeah.
So I kind of jumped into that. And that really gave me a push to physically, and actually a reason to actually start researching what it would take to do this with kids and how much would it cost and what would we need. And I worked at a performing arts high school for many years. It was performing arts oriented. So they were already a school that would have, if they didn't have it, they would make a budget for it, for stuff that they needed, because they had state of the art equipment and all this stuff, because they were used to kids needing various resources for different aspects of performing arts. So I felt if I had a chance at all, being in that school was a big help, because they were geared towards that mindset already. But turned out to be a lot harder to convince people.
Oh, really?
I thought it would be. Huh. I mean, I had to come up with a huge proposal, and I had to present it to administration, like several levels of administration, one at a time. And I mean, it got to a point where I'm like, wow, it feels like I'm proposing a whole lot more than I actually am. I'm like, I just wanted a couple microphones. Like, I I just want to record I just want to plan like a 10-minute podcast so this kid can talk about hockey.
Yeah.
Like that's all he wanted to do was like report about sports. Turned out he was already doing one himself, like in his basement, like every Monday night or something. Yeah. So he was very, very interested, and it just became too much. Plus at that point, I was already had started to work outside of school part-time, learning all this stuff remotely. And, it became a lot. And then when I knew that I was leaving, I'm like, okay. I remember I talked to the kid about it too. And I told him what I was going to be doing. And I said, part of why I'm doing this is because I want to be able to figure out a way to bring opportunities like this to students like you who are super hardworking and want to learn a new type of media and are interested in. And he wanted to be a sports broadcaster. So it all was like tied into all this journalism stuff. And I know now he's in college and he is doing sports broadcasting, and I see him posting his little videos of him with a microphone at a hockey game. Like it's awesome. It's really kind of cool. So, but those are the kind of kids that would approach me for stuff like that. So that I didn't know how I was going to do it. I still, only a year later, I'm just now starting to figure out, branch back into the education world, which is why I'm on Twitter a lot now. So I kind of discovered that world. And for the last year, I've been learning how to produce podcasts, working for a production company and producing like 8 to 10 shows a week. And
wow.
And then, and now producing a couple of shows independently. And I kind of scaled back on that stuff, and I'm just kind of pushing out into the education realm a little bit now, trying to figure out that space and see how I can get myself back in there.
Right. Well, I mean, it sounds like you made a pretty a clean, rapid break with your teaching profession. But now you're trying to kind of bring that around full circle. So what's the importance for you of coming back to the education world?
Well, first of all, when I left, especially everybody was surprised that I was leaving, but at the same time, like I said before, knew me as somebody who always had like other things that I just wanted to pursue that you couldn't do in a school or wanted to try out. And, and people outside of school that, and my family and friends and stuff, some people said, I think you're just someone who's going to miss it too much, and you're just not going to be able to stay away. And I kept trying to reiterate that, well, I'm not trying to just say I'm done with education. I'm just saying that I don't think I want to work in a school in this capacity now. I think I need to give myself space to explore this other venture and see where it can lead.
Well, what was sort of the impetus then for leaving? Because it sounds like it's more than just there was a push and a pull here. So what was the push for you leaving that place? If that's not too point to the question, I don't know.
To decide that I didn't want to work in a school.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
I think a part of it as well is that yes, I'm saying that I did want to find a way to bridge, the wanting to try to work in podcasting with also working with kids, like bridge all that together. But at the same time, I also wanted to learn a craft for myself. And I find that teaching so often is this like selfless thing where you put all your energy into what can I do for all of these kids that come in every day expecting me to be this person. And there isn't a whole lot of time. And especially if you put so much energy into that space, like I did, there isn't a whole lot of that left over. And some people can handle that a lot better than others. And I just wasn't someone who could. Every minute of my time was spent on something for school, whether it was participating in something after school or helping out or running the newspaper, which was so much of my extracurricular time. It left very little space for me to actually find any mental energy left over to dedicate something to myself that I wanted. And I, as someone who's always as we always say, lifetime learners and intellectually curious, and like beyond just being a reader outside of school, I found it very hard to actually pursue something that I found to be very intellectually stimulating and stimulating in other ways. So I thought that this was because other changes were happening in my life at the same time. I kind of thought, you know what, this seems like a good time to just kind of try something new on all fronts. And then it would also allowed me to get out of New York, which I'd been, itching to do for a while anyway.
Yeah. So more, just reminds me of, sort of the classic rom-com trope where, the girl breaks up with so-and-so, and then so she goes out, gets her hair cut, and, that kind of thing. So it seems like you've gone sort of the next step and like, no, I'm going to go to an entirely different coast. I'm going to try a different job. I don't know. Did you get your hair cut?
I did, but not at the very beginning of the year. I did recently.
Oh, that's awesome.
And just threw my hat up in the air like Mary Tyler Moore.
Oh, good for you. Good for you. Well, I swear to you, it's true. Every single girl that I dated up until my wife, she cut her hair after we broke up. So, and so after my last breakup before I met my wife, I actually decided, okay, I'm gonna do the opposite because I had short hair, so fine, I'm gonna grow it out. So I didn't cut my hair for like 2 years.
Yeah. Oh wow!
And that's what got me my wife. So
really,
yeah, she was like, she loved my hair. Yeah, and then and then I got cancer and it all fell out like 4 months into our marriage. So she was like,
oh no.
Yeah.
So the hair theory doesn't always work.
Well, it reeled her in, and then after that, I was like, okay, job's done. Off it goes.
Oh man.
Yeah. Well, she's
wow.
Okay. Well, I could tell people, like I had cancer, and like, oh, I'm so sorry. I was like, dude, I'm not dead. I'm fine.
Yeah.
I'm fine.
You're
good.
Here and you're talking and you're breathing.
Just I don't have gorgeous locks anymore, and that's unfortunate. But whatever. I'll take that.
That's going to be the name of this episode is going to have something to do with hair.
Well, yeah, for sure. That sounds good. I like it. Okay, so you're coming back around to the educational world. What's the value because you're exploring that sort of on your own at this time, but you said you kind of want to bring it back to the students. What's the value for them in podcasting? Okay, we're going to get back to that in a second. We're going to talk about the value of podcasting for students. But first, I have to confess something. I owe the Edmonton Public Library a lot of money in late fines right now. But you know what else? I'm actually really okay with that because the Edmonton Public Library is awesome. And they do awesome things like podcasting. They have a podcast. It's called Overdue Fines. It's hosted by Bryce Crittenden and Caroline Ladd, and they discuss everything that I love and probably some things that you love too, like movies and music and books and pretty much any sort of pop culture and media that you can think of, and probably even some stuff you haven't thought of. You'll also learn more about what you can find at the library, and it comes out every 2 weeks. If you want to know more or listen in, you can find the show at epl.ca/podcast. All right, let's get back to me and Sarah. You're exploring that sort of on your own at this time, but you said you kind of want to bring it back to the students. What's the value for them in podcasting?
I feel like, I mean, without risking sounding like I'm just jumping on the whole student voice movement thing, which was something that started to come about when I was in, I'm sure it existed in some form way before that, but when I was about to graduate college and come out into the teaching world, that was like a buzz term that was pretty new at the time. And I was talking to someone recently about this too. And that idea really resonates with me as far as taking it a step further and being an advocate for not just students using their voice as far as like being heard and having an opinion, but advocating for students like learning how to speak well and learning how to present themselves in ways that do not necessarily rely on how people see them or view them visually. And I think that podcasting allows a lot of that space, because if it didn't exist and something like YouTube was the only thing available for me to like explore like this type of a thing. Yeah. If that's how podcasting was, if that's how it got out into the world, then I do not think that I would be a part of it. And I do not, it's a totally different monster. Yeah. Completely. And I feel like there's there's a certain integrity to being able, I don't know, to kind of force yourself to be able to use your voice in this way. Like, and it kind of like, we did this before, but I do this on my show too. I often will flash the video on and I'll say, hey, and then I'm like, you can keep the video on. And often my guests do, they'll keep the video on of them, but I'll turn it off. And I'm like, the second that goes off, I'm a different person. Like, I don't need to be, unless it's a friend of mine, I don't need to be like in front of someone. Like I kind of like turn into, I feel like a broadcaster, like without the video on. With the video on, I feel like I'm sitting in a room having a hangout with somebody. Like, yeah. I become more formal, and I think I speak better when I'm not thinking about how, like, that I'm just looking, not that I'm thinking, oh my God, this person's looking at me, but I feel like it's more of like you're on display. And I don't know. I just feel like there's a certain like integrity in the idea that you have to plan how to communicate to people without them seeing anything that you're doing or what you're wearing or what your expressions are like. And I think that it's important for students to have that kind of experience.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it kind of strips away so much of, communication, because we rely a lot on body language and facial expressions. So yeah, you just become the voice. And it is a different thing. It's a different beast. So, I think also there's value too in podcasts really encourage protracted conversation. And I mean, man, if something's missing in in modern culture, that's one of them, right?
Yes. And then that ties back to just all of my work. I mean, I was a literature and writing teacher, which is how I got into teaching journalism. And it ties into all the work I did with those students working on publications, because, teaching them how to research, teaching them how to fact check, and teaching them how to go and, talk to the captain of the football team who, the kids that are typically on a newspaper committee are not the kids that are friends with
not typically on the football team. Yeah.
So for me to hand them, like, I'm like, I don't even need to give you a recorder. Like, the kids don't even realize they have the power to do all this stuff right in their hand with their phone. Like a 17-year-old I have to literally take their iPhone and tell them, like, you have a recorder right here.
Yeah.
I'm like, don't go downstairs to the to basketball practice and come back with one photo of the coach. You have a phone that can take 1,000 photos. Yeah. Take 1 million and we'll delete all of them but one. Like, they literally would come back with nothing. And I'm like, no, come on, you have so much power in your hand. So showing them that they had that power, essentially, obviously they pay for their phone, but essentially free right there to use all the time. But having a kid like that, like a quieter kid who just wants to write and learn how to edit and like play with graphics and lay out a newspaper, have that kid take his phone and go down and get a quote from a verbal quote on his phone from the captain of the football team or something like that. Seeing them do that and come out of their shell is it's an honor to be given that opportunity, I feel like, to work with students in that, in that kind of respect. And you don't get to do that a lot in class time. So I always valued, the journalism experiences as something, as my favorite part of my career. And I guess that I wonder if without having had that for so long as part of my life, I wonder if the podcasting thing really would be as big of a connection to me as it is now.
Well, I wonder too, I mean, it almost seems, and I know there's a certain level of awkwardness that just comes with being a teenager and sort of uncertainty about oneself, but it almost seems like there's this additional thing that they've absorbed where they just feel like they don't have any ability to do anything. Telling them that, you can record stuff on your phone. And even, I know that I've got students where I can tell them that and they'll be like, oh yeah, okay. And then they still won't do it because it scares them.
Yeah, it is. And they just don't realize that. I don't know if it's because they see a lot of the discovery of things as like something that adults do. Like adults figure out how to do stuff, and then they come back to me and then they just show me. Like, they don't think of it as like I have the ability to discover the world around me just as well as my teacher does. And you literally have to tell them, like, just open up Gmail and type the letter and then send it. Like, teaching a senior how to send an email, like, it's like maddening to me. I'm like, so yeah, I feel like they often just don't realize until someone shows them, unless they are naturally a self-starter, which so many teenagers just are not, even if they wind up being later on after school, but so many teenagers are not. So, I mean, I feel like it is, and most of them, as soon as you show them, they'll run with it. But having that power, an opportunity to show kids that they have that power was something that I really, appreciate and value, and that, and I want to have that as part of my career in some way, if I can figure out the next step.
What is the next step? What's coming up?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if I can really say right now, because I'm kind of in between a couple of
Is it like top secret, or you don't know?
A little bit of both.
Ooh.
A little bit of both. I'm still doing all the same stuff I was doing, but I am doing some dabbling in a few other podcasting companies that are geared towards education. So don't really have anything official going on yet, but I am just kind of seeing how things work out, and like studying, kind of like what I did at the beginning a year or year and a half ago, just kind of studying what different people are doing and seeing if it's something that I'm interested in.
Right. Well, okay. And you've got your own podcast. Let's just wrap things up with that, because I want to talk a little bit about your podcast.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, like, I'm always just sniffing out other teachers who are involved with film, because I feel like, well, less so nowadays, but I still feel like we're kind of a rare beast. And so it's always nice to make that connection. And you've got your podcast, Bell to Bell podcast. So what's the deal with that? Lay that out there.
Yeah, so my podcast came about, I had been trying to start one before I moved to Los Angeles, but I had so much other stuff going on, it was impossible to like really get that going. So I waited until I moved, and then it was a really emotional thing, leaving the only profession I'd ever known, and most of my friends were teachers, and all of them in New York pretty much. So it was a really emotionally draining experience to go through. And I found that I really still didn't know how to talk to people who weren't teachers. Like, I'm like, this is all I know how to do. I still say that. I'm like, people tell me the way I approach certain things just in the work I'm doing now is very much like a teacher. I'm often given tasks to do because, give Sarah will do that. She used to teach, like, like little things like that. So because of that, I thought I had another idea that I was going to start my first podcast on, and I kind of just totally threw that idea out the window after I moved, because I was like, I think I need to do something that kind of allows me to still talk to teachers and talk about teaching. And a fun way to do that would be to talk about something that I was always passionate about, which was how teachers and schools are perceived in the media by people outside of education. Because I always felt like half of my life was spent defending what I do to people who never do it.
Yep.
So I thought, hey, you know what? Now I'm not involved with or attached to any school or any school district, and I can just watch things or pick out things that I think that I've watched in the past that I think either say something or should have said something better about the world that I spend so much of my time in. And I'm going to ask other teachers to come on and talk about it, and even further ask them to pick stuff that they want to talk about. So that's where that idea was born. It was born from a need to, like, a desire to still be in touch with the world of education. Plus, I didn't want to leave it to begin with totally. I just needed to be focusing on learning the world of podcasting for a while, but I still had that desire to be connected to teachers and what they were doing, but then talk about things that I thought were important in the way people view schools and the way people talk about education. So people come on, they pick a movie or a TV show that has to do something. Most of them take place in schools, but most movies are about teenagers. They're not really about, you don't get movies really about elementary school kids. It seems to be the thing.
No, not too much real intrigue in.
No.
Oh, I just thought of another movie we should have watched. Oh, that's fucking Brick.
I wonder if it's on my list. Oh, Brick. It is on my list. It's on my list. Actually, I have a list of like 140 movies.
Oh, wow.
That I started with a list of maybe like 70, 75. And then the first few people I sent it to added. And then like, as I sent it to, if someone wanted to be on and they couldn't think of something off the top of their head, or they had like 10 things that they couldn't decide, I was just like, let me send you my list. And then maybe something on it will jump out at you that you didn't think of. And you'd be like, oh no, that. And then like, as I started doing that, people started adding their own to this Google Doc. And now it's like 130 or 40 movies. And I just keep crossing them off as people pick them. But
brilliant.
Yeah, so I'm hoping, and I kind of like, I started it and then I had a good momentum, and then I had a big break because a lot of stuff was happening this past fall, and I moved again within LA. So I was like in a disarray, and then I got all new equipment for Christmas, which I'm not using right now. Mm-hmm. And finally got all that set up in my new house. And so now I'm trying to get back. So I kind of like did a few episodes and then stopped. And now like I'm in my big push of like, now I'm getting back into like, this is going to be a thing. So now I have good quality audio. And I mean, so hopefully we'll see a lot more coming from me in that realm now that I have all of that starting to be scheduled better, which is another big thing in podcasting that you don't think about when you just want to start recording.
Yeah.
You actually have to schedule people and make sure they're available and they have to want to do it. You can't force them.
Yeah. It's actually, teachers though, they're a pretty eager bunch. I can tell you that right now. It's pretty easy to book people.
Yes. And so now that I've been like playing around on Twitter a lot more too, I've been finding that, because that was a world that I would not have ventured into as a teacher, and did not really know that whole world existed. And I literally now just ask, I mean, I know you asked me, but then even like within the week or so before you asked me, and then since then, even I've just literally just asked people on Twitter, and it only takes is like one question. I'm like, hey, I do this thing. Do you want to talk about it? And everybody says yes. I haven't had one person say no.
No, neither have I. I've made over 140 of these things, and no one ever says no.
Yeah, so that's great. So that's another good fit, because like I'm used to that kind of a thing in the teacher world, and podcasters are just the same. Like they all want to help each other learn and grow. So I feel like the two worlds easily fit together. It's just that because podcasting as a career is still it's like a thing. I mean, I really don't think my family back home, except for my brothers, who are younger and understand, and they're both in media. And they kind of both understand this, but I don't think anyone else back in New York knows at all what I'm doing. I just give them little updates from time to time.
Tell them you're a YouTuber.
Yeah, right.
You're a YouTuber, but without video.
You can find me on the radio.
Yeah, there you go.
So yeah, I just like find unique ways to explain it to people that don't really understand it. I'm like, I don't understand it myself. I don't know how to explain it to you. But what I was saying was that they, while podcasting is still something so new, like for people to, like you said earlier, like to find right off the bat a way to make money completely from it, is such a new thing that I feel like it goes hand in hand with that educational world for me, because I was so used to being in a world where everyone, for the most part, in the schools that I worked in, people were willing to help each other and, help each other grow and learn. And then I stepped into this Twitter space of teachers doing the same thing. And then I'm going to conferences with podcasters that do the same thing. So it was kind of a good fit. And I'm trying to figure out where there is work for people that want to do meaningful work like that and still have an impact on students and the educational world.
Sweet. Well, if people want to listen to your podcast, or if they want to connect with you on Twitter, how does all that work? How do they get a hold of you?
Okay, so on Twitter, you can find me personally my Twitter name is Candela9, which actually comes from what students called me forever. They used to call me Scandala. So, because my email address at school would always come up Candela. So when the kids saw an email from me, they'd go Scandala. So that's how all of my names, social media names came about. So Scandala9 on Twitter. And then for my podcast, my Twitter is Bell and then the number 2, Bell Pod. On Twitter and on Instagram, I'm the same thing, Scandala9. I do not have a separate Instagram for my podcast.
All right, cool. Well, Sara, thank you so much for sharing your story today and having a good chat about podcasting. Really, this has been good. This has been good.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I was a little worried I wouldn't fit into the mold, but I think that we made it work.
Oh, there is no mold. There is no mold. I'm making this up as I go.
Awesome. Just like a true teacher.
This teacher, absolutely. Yep. Every day. Finally then, Sara, thank you so much for being on the show today. Really appreciate that.
Oh, thank you for asking me. Anytime.
You bet. Well, we'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye. This week's episode of Ed is brought to you by the Alberta Podcast Network. It's a network of podcasts made right here in Alberta, and they cover every topic imaginable. And if you're like me and Sara, maybe you're into the movie thing, you can check out Bollywood is for Lovers. It's a bi-weekly podcast that explores the wonderful world of Hindi cinema through the lens of 2 Canadian cinephiles. On their latest episode, Netflix and Dill, they discuss the increasing availability of Indian shows on Netflix, Amazon Prime, and other streaming services. You can find it and all the other member podcasts over at albertapodcastnetwork.com. And if you want to get in touch or you'd like to be a guest on this show, you can email me at theedpodcast@gmail.com or hit me up on Twitter at theedpodcast. If you'd like to listen to more of Ed, you can head over to the website, theedpodcast.podbean.com, or find us on Apple Podcasts. Just search up Ed Conversations. Ed can also be heard on Voice Ed Radio. It's 24-hour internet broadcasting devoted to the best ideas in education. Just head over to voiced.ca. So, on behalf of myself and Sara, thank you so much for listening. And we'll catch you next time.